It wasn't clear that the growth would happen, as I said earlier, as fast as it has. But I think there was an understanding and a realization early on that it's a much better mousetrap. And particularly the dynamic of a dentist multitasking and becoming a business person, an entrepreneur and a marketer and a human resource professional and insurance expert.
Hey there, dental economist. If you're a dentist owner or a leader within a dental business thinking about growing production, case acceptance, patient and staff satisfaction, positive outcomes, and everything else that comes with running a dental business, then you're a dental economist, and you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Dental Economist Show. We're meeting at the intersection of profit and purpose as I sit down with dental leaders who share their stories about dentistry, business, and growth. Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Today, we're thrilled to have Doug Brown, a prominent leader and entrepreneur in the dental industry, and the co-founder and managing partner of Dental Innovation Alliance. With over 22 years of experience, he's successfully led and expanded national DSOs. Currently, he is dedicated to investing in and advising early-stage dental technology companies, using his extensive industry knowledge and network. Also with us is Kentucky Morrow, Principal of Investments at DIA. He is an experienced investment professional with demonstrated success in M&A transactions from venture to middle market companies. He has successfully executed transactions in the healthcare sector, including dental and medical, technology, and business services. Welcome to the show, Doug in Kentucky. How are we today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us, Mike.
I'm really excited to have this conversation with both of you. I've been seeing a lot about DIA on LinkedIn, hearing a lot about it in conversations that are taking place at the different conferences. To start out, Doug, I would love to hear if you can kind of share a little bit about, maybe start with your overall career path and how it led you to founding Dental Innovation Alliance.
I started in public accounting and found that I learned a lot about business, but it was something that was clear I didn't want to continue to do. I moved into multi-unit retail. So you can think about convenience stores, furniture, consumer electronics retailing. So I got a real good handle on how to administrate and deal with some of the financial aspects of those businesses. And then I had a friend who was starting a small group practice in dentistry. And I said, gosh, I like the margins a whole lot better than I do electronics. So let's do this. And I also saw a big industry that was just starting to consolidate. Really, at that time, Mike had no idea how fast the consolidation would occur and really found it to be fascinating. At that time, there was no roadmap for DSOs. There wasn't a management or leadership pool. So we had to figure it out as we go. And started with a small group, 20 practices. I got to meet at that time, this was in the late 90s, Rick Workman, Bob Fontana, Steve Thorne. We got together regularly and compared notes and really helped each other along the way in different models in different parts of the country. And that led to the foundation of the ADSO, which I've been a part of ever since. I found my way from one DSO to another, and most recently Affordable Care, which is Affordable Dentures and Implants, was CEO there for 7 years, then vice chairman, still an investor there, and just fell in love with that model where you have doctor owners, you have very little in the way of third-party payer issues that you have in a lot of the traditional GP practices, and very satisfied clinicians who love what they do to change patients' lives every day. So as I said, it's time to hang it up as an operator, which was about 7 years ago. I moved into investing by myself and then with Tom Sharp, who was co-managing partner of DIA. And we began investing in early stage dental technology companies. We liked what we saw. We saw the opportunity. We were amazed at the variety of companies and the number of companies, some of which had concepts that probably wouldn't make it. We knew that, but many of them would. And then we started turning to some of our colleagues in the industry that they are helping us support these companies in many ways as advisors, board members, investors, connectors. And so we've expanded that quite a bit. So in total, about a dozen companies since 2018 that I've been involved with in this role.
Kentucky, could you share a little bit about your background and how did you and Doug meet and how did this all come to be?
So coming out of school, I joined an investment bank called England & Company that focused on middle market healthcare transactions. I spent a lot of my time with the medical device team. So looked at anywhere from implants to diagnostics, but also touched on healthcare services and IT as well. I had a really great time there, worked on both advising companies for raising capital as well as ultimately exiting and selling either to a private equity partner or a larger strategic corporation. But was fortunate to get connected to Doug and Tom really at some of the early stages of DIA where they were just starting to work with some other people across the industry. And what I found really interesting coming from more of a investment background was the model that DIA had, which was really creating a group of people that can be not just capital, but advisors and customers to companies. And it was really differentiated. When you look at most investment firms, their real value add is simply capital, and it kind of ends there. They say they can give advice, but it tends to be generic. I was really excited kind of about the prospect of DIA and always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial streak in myself. So to be able to join a firm at really kind of its early beginnings really appealed to me, in addition to the ability to help companies above and beyond just capital.
And I think this next question, Doug, might have been answered in some part to Kentucky outline what makes DIA unique. But when I hear your background, and you mentioned at the early stage of your career, you were in multi-unit retail, and then you moved into the dental space. And now as an investor, as an advisor, what were the factors that contributed to choosing to launch an investment firm that was focused specifically on the dental vertical rather than having more of a horizontal focus or multi-vertical focus?
It's a good question because we debated that quite a bit in the beginning. There are a lot of healthcare verticals that need technology. But the fact is, we want to de-risk our investments. And the best way to do that is to have knowledge, connections, and market access. And we don't have that in these other verticals. Between Tom and I, we've got 50 years of experience in building up relationships. And what makes DIA unique from other venture capital firms is that we go in with a tremendous amount of market knowledge to begin with. We then have investors that are in the industry and can provide the resources, the connections, the ability to sell the product into large dental support organizations. But we also have strategic investors, and these are large companies, global companies in dentistry that can do some of the same things, but also they can buy those companies when they end up exiting the venture phase and move into the growth phase. And so it's a very unique model, and it's one that, like I say, it de-risks the investment at each stage of the process.
I'd be very curious to get a better understanding of just what level of innovation, from your perspective, is occurring in dental right now. And maybe let me frame the question a little bit differently. How many companies are being built with an intent to serve the dental space, startups? Is this something where you're receiving a large amount consistently throughout the course of the year? Do you see it accelerating, or what is your overall viewpoint on the technology and startup ecosystem within dental today?
It's a large number. Within our CRM, we've got over 900, and we receive inquiries, in some cases pitch decks, at the rate of about 45 per month. So it's very clear that entrepreneurs have identified this very large segment of healthcare as needing technology advancement. And they see an opportunity to take their ideas and grow it, and to grow it in a very fast way. And DSOs make that happen because there are business teams attached to every DSO that have the time and resources to pilot. Whereas in a single practice, a doc's seeing patients, 35 to 40 hours a week, and it's hard for them to do that. So really, the acceleration has come with the growth and the consolidation of DSOs in part. Again, it's a huge group of companies, and no doubt we don't have visibility to all of them. So I'm sure it's well over 1,000 right now in the dental space alone.
When you're looking at companies to invest in, do you lean in towards a certain type of investment? Is it a software company? Could it be services? Could it be tie into hardware devices? Are you agnostic as far as that goes?
Let me kick that one to Kentucky. He's kind of the expert on the various sectors of our investments.
I would say we really look at everything across the dental sector that can do one of three things, which is either one, expand access to care, two, improve care outcomes, or 3, improve practice level efficiency. And what that means is we'll look at software companies, device companies, and we'll even take a look at some consumer companies if there's an angle where they can be in the dental practice. What we tend to shy away from, though, and frankly won't invest in, is a dental support organization, a clinic, or a dental lab. We're really looking for those technologies and innovations that can be used by clinicians, by practices to improve their operations and improve care outcomes.
Is there a single pitch deck for a software company today that does not include an AI component?
I would say there is. And I think we've invested actually in a number of those companies. We've invested in Uptime Health that does equipment maintenance and compliance tracking. I think they're starting to build out some of those solutions to determine when you'll have equipment failures. Cloud Dentistry is a workforce management platform to find both temporary labor as well as manage your existing staff, help with employee retention, and even permanent placements for recruitment as well. So I think you hit on something really important, which is the large trend of AI. But for us as investors, but also just thinking about the landscape of dental broadly, there's a lot of AI that is a fad in some ways, right? It has a very minor application, but ultimately what's really important is solving that specific business application that's adding true value. Just because you can identify and pattern match very quickly and effectively doesn't mean that you're necessarily adding value. And at the end of the day, that's what we really look for when we're evaluating companies is what's that value add? What problem are they really solving? And there's ways where AI helps with that. And there's other problem sets that AI doesn't necessarily help with. And I say that having invested in 2 AI companies as well, Pearl for diagnostic imaging, as well as Relu for 3D treatment planning. We're very open to the sector, but I wouldn't say it's a requirement by any means.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So you were just talking about the problems that can be solved. And another thing that I'm curious about, especially as it relates to the influx of AI and the fact that there is such a focus on that today, is sometimes I hear about these new ideas. And it sounds great to me, but it sounds like a feature or maybe at best a product, but not a company. Something that doesn't really have legs possibly, or that if that is the launch of the company, with that one particular feature or problem that's being solved, that it will have to morph over time into something larger. Is that an element of what you consider when you're evaluating products or companies for investment? And is it a larger concern with AI-based solutions than it would be others at this point?
Every one of these companies starts with a concept, an idea, a feature, as you refer to it. And we never invest at that phase. As good an idea as it is, or as important a problem or pain point for dental practices as it might be. So to us, it's very important for any company to have established at least a small team, that they've gone through at least, let's say, 75% development of the product. And then most importantly, that they have gone to market, at least in a small way, to have proven that this is something that, number one, dental practices and dentists value, and number two, that it actually works and that there is a return on using that particular product. So it's a very tricky thing for us, but it's something we really focus on. It's not just pre-revenue idea, super idea, great founder. It may have all those things, but it has to have some efficacy. And then we're there to then say, hey, we can help you advance this. We can help you finish that 25% development because we bring ideas, and then we can get you to customers that will hopefully use this.
So would you say then that generally you're looking for post-revenue investments in either seed Series A? Would that be typically the wheelhouse where you can add the most value through the advisory program that you also have, and that would be the area of focus for you all? And I guess as a follow-on, would you turn down the opportunity to participate in a larger round in the future? Or like from a long-term plan for DIA, is it really just but a notion of focusing on what you do well and just leaning into that part?
I would characterize it that 90% of our investment will go into that seed to Series A, but we do want to look at those, let's say 5% that have a really good start. They may not have revenue. They may be waiting for FDA approval if it's a device, let's say, but they're teed up and likely to get there. And we will bet on a small number of those really early stage companies, but it's beyond a concept. There is some development. And then on the other hand, to your question, we will invest occasionally in growth companies if there's a compelling reason to do so. And that might be that we simply can come in under favorable terms, or we really see a growth rate that will continue to go into the future, or that we simply know that we can bring value through our network of DSOs and customers. But you hit it, right in that kind of Series A is really our sweet spot.
Kentucky, you recently joined the board of directors for Smiles. Would you mind sharing a bit about what attracted Dental Innovation Alliance to that particular investment, and maybe what excites you the most about their approach to orthodontic treatment?
Smiles is our most recent investment, and they have, I'll say, really two solutions. Number one is a lingual bracing system for 3-to-3, or you can call it social 6 solutions. And then the second is a monitoring solution that you can use at home for getting a view of the teeth and tracking treatment. And what's interesting kind of about their viewer treatment is it's really helpful for rapid palatal expansion, even beyond orthodontics, because you get such a strong occlusal view. You can see the whole palate for theirs. What drew us to the solution, I think, was a number of things. It's a product in market with a team that has built multiple businesses before and had successful exits, first and foremost. But from a product standpoint, you can go out on the street and talk to people, ask them, would they prefer aligners or would they prefer a lingual solution that's very easy to apply? And as we think about dentistry broadly, that consumerization trend of serving the patient, meeting them where they are, fulfilling their needs is something that we're very focused on, particularly in a market like orthodontics that's so aesthetically driven. So to have a solution that's completely hidden, you don't need to take it out when you're eating lunch with your coworkers and have it be frankly disgusting, right? Like a traditional aligner. It's really a compelling solution. And what we found kind of on top of that was it's a solution designed to help GPs. They have an indirect bonding tray for their wire. So it's very easy to apply. They're doing cases at the start that are less complex. They plan on expanding that product offering and doing more complexes over time. But it's a great way for GPs to grow their business, get involved in orthodontic cases while really meeting a need and differentiating themselves compared to other practices for such a high value add and really kind of consumer driven product that is growing rapidly. Orthodontics as a general market is growing 20% plus year over year. And when you really focus at aesthetically driven cases, it's growing even faster. We think this is a product that has broad appeal and can actually expand the orthodontic market as well.
Let me ask you guys about another investment of yours as well. And this can go to either of you. Cloud Dentistry. Obviously, one of the challenges that DSOs, that the entire industry is facing right now is labor shortages, labor challenges. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what led to that investment and what you're seeing post-investment as far as the kind of appetite in the space for that type of technology?
I have a background in healthcare staffing, so I have spent a fair bit of time post-investment working with the cloud team. But I think Doug brings a lot of unique insight into why we chose to invest in cloud and what we're seeing on the staffing market. So I'll let him maybe describe some of those early investment dynamics.
This is not a new product. It's a new way to deliver a service that, many people have done for a long time, albeit in an inefficient way. So most staffing firms, and whether it's in dentistry or healthcare or void staffing, temporary staffing firms in particular, it's labor intensive. It takes time, and matching up the individual needs of a dental practice with the availability of certain staff is a tricky thing, and it's not done efficiently through people. And so cloud has created an Uber-like experience where within minutes, a dental practice can say, I need a hygienist tomorrow, 8 hours. And within minutes, they may have 2 to 5 people come on their phones and provide their availability, their fee, their reviews, their skills, and in some cases, be a candidate for a full-time employee if that's what the practice is seeking. And really, nobody else has developed that. There is the time element, and there's also the cost element. There isn't a markup, which you typically see 20 to 30% on top of what that hygienist or dental assistant earns because it's a very low cost subscription fee. It's hard to deny, as much as many dental practices don't like the trend towards temporary staffing, because they do see a dependence on folks that they don't have as W-2 employees. The reality is they need them. And so we just think that the idea is great, the team is great, and Kentucky's done a super job on the front end, really analyzing the actual performance of the company, the growth of the company, and how they're going to market.
So to make sure I heard that correctly, when you were talking about the monetization model, you said it is not an upsell or an upcharge on the hourly cost. It is purely a subscription-based model for that service. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's a very affordable. It's typically $100 a month for an unlimited number of placements. And there isn't a charge either if that employee is hired. So you get, the opportunity, free look at employees that may land in your practice as a full-time employee.
As a guy that's been in sales for forever, that sounds like a great product to sell and to represent. There's a lot of value add there, not the least of which is if you're not needing to use a headhunter or recruiter to fill roles or positions, which typically can cost 25% of the first year's expense of their salary or cost. That's meaningful. So very interesting. Doug, I'm curious, you mentioned about when you first kind of entered into the dental space and you made these connections with Bob Fontana and Rick Workman, and Heartland and Aspen have grown tremendously. You were at the helm of affordable care. When you're thinking back on those times, was there a notion that DSOs were going to become what they are today, which I think many people would argue is still maybe in its early phases? There's still a lot of consolidation to go. But was that always pretty clear?
I would say it wasn't clear that the growth would happen, as I said earlier, as fast as it has. But I think there was an understanding and a realization early on that it's a much better mousetrap. And particularly the dynamic of a dentist multitasking and becoming a business person, an entrepreneur and a marketer and a human resource professional and insurance expert. The complexity has grown multiple times in the last 30 years of running a dental practice. And to be competitive, you have to master everything. If you have a weakness, it's going to show in your delivery of care. And so I think we all realized it took us a while to figure it out, quite frankly, how to do it. Because as I said, there was no roadmap and we all made mistakes, but we all knew this is the way it's likely to go. And of course, we had the advantage of seeing what happened with pharmacies and what happened with eye care and other verticals that consolidated in their smaller industries, and the dynamics were different, but they all consolidated successfully. And who wins? I think both patient wins and the healthcare professional wins, because the healthcare professional can focus on what they do best, and patients, I think, get their needs met better by having a team supporting that practice and not just depending upon a dentist who does everything well. It's hard.
This may be a hard question to answer, but when you made the comment that DSOs really drive innovation, and it makes a ton of sense, I agree completely. And you even outlined the reasons why that is. There are resources within a DSO that have the ability to focus on what these new technologies and innovations will be that are not chairside the entire time, as you find with independent practices. When you think back at the early stages of you at the helm of DSOs, what are some of the technologies that you wish you had then? And maybe another way of thinking about it is for DSOs that are still maybe lagging in technology adoption, and I think that there are quite a few out there, how would you prioritize today which technologies you would be pursuing to add the most value creation to your organization?
It's hard because there are so many, but I would point in particular to revenue cycle management, which has become, again, much more complex with the variety of insurance plans and the difficulty in really getting efficiencies and getting insurance verified and getting claims processed and money collected. And the burden that's put on the practice through manpower and folks that are sitting at the desk instead of being patient-facing, they've got their heads in the computers trying to figure out account balances and so forth. If you add it up, it's a huge burden. And that comes out of the dentist's pocket and it comes out of the patient's pocket, that inefficiency. And I think if I had to say there's been more clinical device advancement to help dental practices than frankly there has been in revenue cycle management. And it's because there are companies focusing on solving problems and dealing with pain points, but they do it in silos. They do something really well within that, but the whole chain of revenue cycle management has yet to be tackled. And we're keeping our eye out for ways to do that. No magic bullet, because they're, practice management systems, as you well know, vary quite a bit, and insurers vary quite a bit, and the needs and the patient base of individual practice varies. So you can't apply one solution very easily. But I think we'll get there, as happened in the hospital world and elsewhere.
It is complicated and complex, but it is encouraging to see a lot of what's being worked on in that space these days. Kentucky, I'm curious from your perspective, you mentioned, I believe it was in reference to Alta Smiles, that it was a founding team that had previous success at founding a company, maybe with an exit or something in the past. When you're evaluating new pitches and somebody comes in and is like, hey, we have this great idea, how would you rank the founding team or the founder themselves having previous experience? Like, you mentioned Pearl and a friend of Fear, he had gone before. He's had a lot of success with being a founder and entrepreneur for a long time versus the idea or the concept or the business that they have. Would you rank the idea higher if it was like one or the other? Or how do you think about that when you're evaluating possible investments?
It might be a little bit glib, but I would say it's hard to rank them. And in fact, we don't. We're in both the envious spot, but also difficult spot of being able to be selective with investments that we make. We actively choose to make 4 to 5 investments a year on average is our target. And the reason for that is we have to find companies that are at both the right stage, have both the right idea and right team to be able to execute and also allow us to add value. So I would say, as a general rule, number one, we're taking a minority stake in companies. It's not a full buyout. So you need the team. That's someone who you're partnering with for the long term. And you need to have trust, support, and confidence in them. But you also need to have a good idea. There's some very early stage investors that might invest entirely on the team, expecting the idea to change. Whereas we typically are looking for at least early market traction, if not more established market traction, as a way of somewhat validating that idea as well. Understand it's a bit of a non-answer, but I would say just because you're extremely pedigreed doesn't necessarily mean it's a great investment, or just because you have a great idea doesn't necessarily mean you're the right team to execute on that idea. And we see a lot of companies that we stay in touch with because maybe we think their idea needs refinement, or if they continue to round out their team by adding an individual that has that sales expertise that you mentioned earlier, it could become a fit. And we try to work with companies to find that, to make sure it's a right fit. But it's one of the difficult, but also lucky spots of our job is we don't have to pick one over the other. We're really looking for both.
And Mike, if I could add on to this, and I might differ just slightly with Kentucky, and I'll explain why. I might give a little bit of an edge to the team, and that is because we see quite often ideas morph. And the original idea just isn't spot on, but there's a variation of that idea, where there's an entirely new idea that the team has expertise and can work on. And if you don't have a team member that has the ability to zig and zag when necessary, and they lock into an idea that, and maybe stay with an idea too long, then you have a failure. But overall, I agree with Kentucky. You need both of them, but having that ability to kind of sensitize to the environment and to what works and what doesn't is very important too.
Yeah, there's always been the notion in the startup world of a pivot. Like you've heard many times of somebody that started with something and they end up pivoting into something else and having great success with it. But somebody that's had the experience of being able to navigate through that, I would imagine, is of a premium. And then conversely, you have examples like who was the founder of WeWork, Adam Newman. And WeWork was this enormous bubble, I guess, in a sense, that ended up having not the best outcome. And then he comes around again. So now I have it's basically WeWork, but it's residential. And you've got Sequoia's, yeah, we'll give you hundreds of $1 million again. Let's go for round 2. So it's always interesting to kind of watch the interactions that the folks have and the value that they place on maybe somebody's experience having done that before. Doug, as a follow-up question, related to your time as an operator and now entering this phase of your career as an investor. What are some things that you really enjoy about it? And is there anything that you miss about being on the operating side of the business?
Wow, that's a big question. I'm not one to look back that much. I'm very proud of my career. I'm very happy I did what I did. But running a business that's in 42 states with thousands of employees is very demanding over time. And I think right now, the pressures that all DSOs are feeling, and I don't know of any exceptions, the workforce issues, the banking issues, there's some flattening of demand among adults. All of those things are kind of converging at the same time. And so I love my good fortune to have pivoted at a time when there are solutions where I can understand those problems and having been an operator, guide new, younger operators typically and help them find a way to be successful as well. And so I really like working with a smaller team. We've got about 10 people in our core group here. We have a broader network of investors, but they're all kind of hand-selected good people. And that's a really neat thing to be able to do, is to work with people every day that you've known for a while and you really enjoy. And there will be failures. A venture fund is going to have some failed investments. And that hasn't happened yet, but that's inevitable. But we're also going to have some incredible successes. And you have to be able to kind of take one with the other in this type of model. And that's kind of fun. It's kind of exciting. And to try to minimize the risk and really do everything we can and go above and beyond with our portfolio company leaders to help them in the ways that we can.
It's interesting to hear you talk about it. And I was very interested in the answer because at some point in the future, I've always had a notion that investing would be very appealing to me. And I think about my own career trajectory, and it feels like every stage, part of being successful at that stage is the increased willingness to give up some control. Because as you move into position after position, you actually have less direct ability to do the job yourself. And it becomes more of giving control to those around you. And I think that phase of moving into being an investor, you probably have the least amount of control in the direct outputs of the company or organization. You influence it, but you don't have the ability today make those decisions. And so I was just kind of curious what that type of experience is like.
It is. And we've found ourselves in a spot where there's a lot of interesting technology coming out of Europe and sophisticated technology. And we've invested in 3 companies in Europe. And, why is that? They do not have a knowledge of the US market, the biggest dental market in the world, and they value what we bring to the table. And yet they have something unique that we don't have here. So it's a great partnership. And the good vibes going back and forth across the ocean as we help them and they grow. And it's a global thing now. And even in Asia and other parts of the world, there's some interesting stuff coming out. And we like to be part of that too, and not just within this country.
Kentucky, where do you go to learn? As you're looking to continually kind of advance throughout the course of your career, you're working with all of these founders and you're looking to build a DIA. What is your approach to kind of having that continual learning?
I have to say, coming from a generalist medical device technology background, joining Doug, Tom, and really the whole investor group at DIA was a gift in terms of learning the dental sector. I mean, you have people that have built some of the most largest and impressive companies in the sector. So to be able to just hear them, kind of hear their thoughts, knowledge, and feedback has been an incredible gift from that standpoint. I'd say my approach to learning in general is just talking to people, number one, and talking to people that have done it before, understand their perspective. And I'm someone that needs to get involved with my hands and try myself. I understand I'm not going to be an expert at everything I do, but by trying to do it myself or trying to build up that knowledge by be that reading textbooks on a subject or going to biology lab to try to understand it, that's what allows me to learn best. But I think I've really been fortunate throughout my career to be surrounded by some of the best minds, both in dentistry as well as before then in finance, medical devices as well. So just being open and talking to people and then really trying to apply it, I think has been fortunate for me.
And Mike, to Kentucky's horn, we've learned as much from him about business and investing as he's learned from us about teeth. So it's been a really good marriage. And, obviously we have, there's compatibility in personalities and principles and so forth. Kentucky's younger than I am, but I learn from him every day. And that's really the whole team is built that way, each other.
I have to say it helps that Doug's probably forgotten in 1 year more about business than I've learned my whole life. So it's good. It allows me to reteach some old lessons that have been forgotten, I'll say.
I'm not sure if it's a core value of yours or not, but it becomes very clear in the course of the conversation that humility and being humble is something that you guys kind of walk on a day-to-day basis as you approach this. And Kentucky, I've asked a lot of people on this podcast, like, where do you go to learn? You're the first person that mentioned reading a textbook. And I love that so much. I actually read a textbook this year for the first time in a very long time, but it's not a common answer that is received. Kudos to you on that one. As a follow-up, you guys launched a podcast. Speaking of helping other people learn, can you talk a little bit about the purpose of the podcast and what people can expect and where they can find it?
So it's the Bright Ideas podcast, and it was really launched with the idea of helping expand kind of knowledge and connectivity to dental innovation and the dental sector broadly. We've been fortunate to have some great guests on that podcast, and we'll expect to have a number of other guests, both from leading DSOs, leading clinicians, some of the entrepreneurial companies that we've invested in, some entrepreneurial companies that we haven't invested in but really respect, and some of the large distributors, OEMs as well, but all with the goal of crystallizing and sharing that knowledge of innovation. And what I'd say it really stems out of is a program we have at DIA more broadly called InnoCircle, which is a way for people to get connected to DIA and get connected to innovation. When we speak to DSOs, but also practice owners, they're inundated with new technologies. I think Doug mentioned we have over 900 companies in our CRM. So we try to find those most promising companies, those that have the ability to stick around, share, and that we find real value to promote them and share them through our knowledge base. Happy if anyone wants to join InnoCircle, they can reach out. But to the extent that they want to just be passive, you can find the Bright Ideas podcast on Spotify, Apple, or a number of other kind of podcast networks as well.
Fantastic. And Doug, last question for you. As you look towards the back half of this year, maybe even entering into 2025, what gets you the most excited? What are you most looking forward to? What's something that you're working on that you think is extra special or something that you're really looking forward to working on?
I guess what I would start with saying is that it's kind of a unique time for this investing in this stage companies because there isn't a lot of money coming into venture capital and even PE. We're fortunate to have the resources to invest, and it's a time when there's a great need and where we can get good terms. And in good terms, meaning we come in with a lot of energy with the deal we've cut with these portfolio companies to help them. And likewise, they want to get a good return for us and for our investors. And so Kentucky mentioned this, we're in a position to be very selective. We will invest in probably less than 2% of the companies we look at. And that doesn't mean that all of the other 98% are not good companies and are not be successful. It's just we want the very best. And we do this in a way where we don't just look opportunistically at this particular company. Should we invest? Should we not? But let's look at all of the competitors that are there trying to do the same thing, compare and contrast at a very detailed level, those comparisons with our network of practice owners and DSO executives and say, we're going to bet on this one. In a way, the market hasn't been great the last couple of days. We've all seen that. There are headwinds in the economy, but we think this is a terrific time to be investing in these companies. And we know that demand is there from the dental practice network of 150,000 practices and many more if you look at the global market. So we're very excited about it.
Thank you both so much for joining. Before we wrap, how can people find you all? Websites, any socials, anything you'd like to share?
We're on LinkedIn. Kentucky, how can they connect to InnoCircle?
I think you can go to our website. We have our emails under kind of each of our profiles there. We also have a sign up for those that want to join InnoCircle as well. Or feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to meet anyone anytime. But Mike, wanted to just thank you again for having us on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
That's been great. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much. The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.